Today, there is growing anxiety on the right over the results of a Texas special election that the Wall Street Journal editorial board summed up like this. How does a Republican lose by 14 points in a safe, conservative Texas state Senate seat that President Trump carried by 17 points in 2024? Answer: when there's a voter backlash against the Trump administration. Notably, it's mass deportation debacles. Here's the victor, Democratic Taylor Reneau, a union leader and first-time candidate, talking to MS Now's Joe Scarborough about how he won big in that deep red district.
In a place like Fort Worth, Texas, when you knocked on doors, had people that had voted Republican their whole life decide to vote for you?
To me, it was simple. We had to focus on solutions, not partisan politics. Bringing communities together, that's what it's all about.
Hi, Adam is here. Stop whatever you're doing right now and listen to me carefully. Because what just happened in Texas is one of those political earthquakes that doesn't come along very often. The kind of result that makes everyone in Washington stop what they're doing and stare at their screens in disbelief. Democrats just flipped a deep red Texas state Senate seat.
Right now, we're going to turn to Texas, where a major upset in a state Senate race is rattling Republicans nationwide and driving Democratic optimism ahead of this year's midterms. Democrat Taylor Reneau won a state special election Saturday, beating Republican Leah Wamensgans by 15 points, flipping a district President Trump won by 17 points in 2024. Reneau telling reporters after that this race wasn't about party.
This isn't red versus blue. This is right versus wrong. This is about public school funding. This is about helping working folks. This is about lowering costs. This is about everyday working folks. So that's what I think this is about.
Let me say that again so it really sinks in. In Texas, one of the most reliably Republican districts in the entire state, a seat that Donald Trump himself won by roughly 17 points in the 2024 presidential election. Democrats took it, and they didn't just win, they demolished the Republican by about 14 points.
We have done the work as far as showing up to doors, making phone calls, talking with folks, and learning, and listening, and building our skills here in the campaign mindset. We're going to keep doing that. We have a formula that is for the people, by the people, and we're going to keep that going.
Do the math on that for a second. That's a net swing of approximately 30 points toward Democrats in a single district. 30 points. In a Fort Worth suburban district that Republicans have controlled for decades. In territory that was supposed to be as safe and untouchable as it gets for the GOP anywhere in America. And here's the part that makes this whole thing so deliciously painful for Trump.
Mr. President, from Texas, a Democrat won your special election in an area that you had won by 17 points. What is your reaction to that?
I don't know. I didn't hear about it. Somebody ran where?
In Texas, a special election for legislative seat. The 9th state Senate seat.
I'm not involved with that. That's a local Texas race.
Did you endorse the Republican?
You mean I won by 17
You did.
and this person lost?
And
Things like that happen.
Does it worry you about the
Well, you don't know whether or not it's transferable. You know, I'm not on the ballot, so you don't know whether or not it's transferable. But, you know, you put the Democrats in, you'll end up with open borders again. You'll end up with crime all over the place. We have no crime anymore. And, I mean, think of it. The country is the lowest crime it's had in 125 years.
The Republican candidate who got absolutely destroyed in what was supposed to be friendly home territory wasn't some random unknown who stumbled into a bad campaign with no support. This was a candidate that Donald Trump personally and enthusiastically endorsed by name. He called her a true MAGA warrior publicly. He fired off multiple messages to his massive Texas supporter base in the final days of the race, specifically urging every single one of them to get out and vote for her. He put his personal name, his personal brand, his personal political reputation directly on the line for this specific race in this specific district. And despite all of that, despite the full weight of a presidential endorsement and the entire MAGA messaging machine behind her, she got absolutely blown out of the water by a 14-point margin. The winner is a man named Taylor Reneau, working-class union leader, complete first-time political candidate. Most people living outside the Fort Worth metro area had never even heard of him before this special election campaign started a few months ago. This guy walked straight into a district that was supposed to be an impenetrable Republican fortress, a district where Democrats had been losing by huge margins for as long as anyone could remember, and he won approximately 57% of the vote to roughly 43% for the Trump-endorsed Republican. This is not a narrow squeaker that you can chalk up to random chance or some weird local quirk. This is not a razor-thin upset that can be explained away with convenient technical excuses about unusual turnout patterns. This is a full-blown 14-point demolition job in a district that Donald Trump himself completely dominated just 2 years ago. The reactions pouring in from both sides tell you everything about how significant this is. On the Democratic side, the DNC and strategists across the country are absolutely euphoric. DNC Chair Ken Martin came out publicly and said, "In a Trump plus 17 district, Republicans had to go all out with everything they had, and they still lost by double digits. Tonight's results prove beyond any doubt that no Republican seat anywhere in the country is safe heading into 2026. That's not just standard victory celebration rhetoric. That's a political organization that now genuinely believes it has discovered a working blueprint for competing and winning in places that were previously considered completely impossible territory for Democratic candidates." On the Republican side, the reaction has been a jarring mixture of open panic, bitter finger-pointing, and some genuinely honest soul-searching of the kind you almost never see from this party. Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, one of the most prominent and powerful Republican elected officials in the entire state, came out publicly and called this election result a wake-up call for Republicans everywhere. He said Republicans absolutely cannot take anything for granted anymore in any race, in any district, and the losing candidate herself admitted openly and honestly that Democratic voters were highly motivated and energized while far too many Republican voters in the district simply chose to stay home on Election Day rather than come out and vote. Now here's the part I find most revealing and, honestly, most entertaining. Donald Trump's reaction. When he originally endorsed this candidate and put his name all over this race, he was clearly expecting a comfortable victory that he could claim full credit for and use as public proof that MAGA is still the dominant, unstoppable force in American politics. But when she lost, and she didn't just narrowly lose, she got absolutely blown out by 14 points, Trump immediately tried to run away from the whole thing as fast as humanly possible. He told reporters with a straight face that he was not really involved in the race. He dismissed the whole thing as just a local Texas race that had nothing to do with him or his movement. And he actually said, and I genuinely love this quote, "I'm not on the ballot. You don't know whether or not it's transferable. Are you kidding me right now?" This is the exact same man who personally endorsed the candidate by name, who called her a MAGA warrior publicly, who sent out multiple direct messages telling millions of his supporters to go vote for her. And now that she lost by 14 points in a district he won by 17, he suddenly wants every person in America to believe he had absolutely nothing to do with any of it. Nobody is buying that pathetic attempt at distance. Not the Democrats who just won a historic upset. Not the Republicans who are now openly panicking about 2026. And certainly not the political analysts who are looking at this result and connecting it directly to a much bigger and much more troubling pattern for Trump and the entire Republican Party. So, what's actually driving this? Why are Democrats suddenly overperforming by these enormous margins in places that are supposed to be safely Republican? It comes down to two powerful factors working together. Factor 1. Democratic voters across the country are extremely energized and politically motivated right now at levels that are genuinely remarkable for an off-cycle period. They're angry and fired up about what they see happening with the Trump administration. The court battles, the executive overreach, the terror of chaos, the immigration controversies, all of the institutional turmoil and constitutional conflicts that have defined Trump's second term are acting as a massive motivational engine driving Democratic turnout to levels far above what anyone would normally expect. Factor 2. MAGA voters are not showing up to the polls the way they used to. The enthusiasm gap that used to reliably favor Trump and his endorsed candidates has completely flipped upside down. In this Texas race, Senior Republican leaders openly admitted that far too many of their own voters simply stayed home on Election Day. They did not show up even with Trump personally urging them to vote. Even with the full party apparatus telling them this race was important, they just did not care enough to make the effort. This erosion of base enthusiasm connects directly to something NBC News polling identified back in late 2025. There are visible, measurable cracks forming within the MAGA political base itself. The percentage of Republican voters who strongly identify as part of the MAGA movement has been declining noticeably. Strong approval ratings for Trump among his own core MAGA supporters have dropped by several points over the course of his second term. The raw intensity and passionate energy that once made MAGA arguably the most powerful grassroots political mobilization force in modern American history is visibly and undeniably fading. And this Texas electoral loss does not exist in some isolated political bubble completely separate from everything else that has been going wrong for Trump. The courts have been striking down his major policy initiatives left and right. The Supreme Court killed his entire tariff regime. Federal judges have permanently blocked his election executive order. His own judicial appointees have held his federal agencies in contempt of court. And now, on top of all those crushing institutional and legal defeats, the actual voters themselves in one of the reddest parts of one of the reddest states in the entire country are sending a loud message through the ballot box that MAGA is simply not the unstoppable political juggernaut that Trump keeps loudly pretending it still is. The strongman image is cracking. The aura of political invincibility that Trump has spent years cultivating is dissolving right before our eyes. And you can see that dissolution most clearly in how Trump himself reacted. A truly confident and politically dominant leader does not frantically run away from his own endorsement the instant the candidate he backs loses an election. A leader who genuinely believes in the strength of his political movement does not nervously dismiss a 30-point swing against his party as merely some insignificant local race. Trump endorsed the candidate. Trump told people to vote. And Republican voters in a deep red district shrugged their shoulders and stayed on their couches anyway. Meanwhile, Democratic voters who had every logical reason to believe they had zero chance of winning showed up in massive numbers and delivered a 14-point landslide. Let me break down what this means going forward. First, Trump's political endorsement has officially become a liability in competitive races rather than the powerful asset it used to be. Every Republican candidate across the country who is preparing to run in a competitive district in 2026 is now looking at this Texas result and quietly asking themselves a very uncomfortable question: do I actually want Donald Trump to endorse me? Because if his personal endorsement cannot save a Republican candidate in a deep red Texas district that he won by 17 points, then what exactly is that endorsement going to do for a Republican running in a genuine toss-up swing district in Pennsylvania or Michigan or Arizona, where the partisan margins are already razor-thin? The honest answer is that a Trump endorsement in a competitive 2026 general election race might actually hurt the Republican candidate more than it helps. Second, the cracks in the MAGA base are undeniably real, and they're getting wider. Republican voters in a deep red district, voters who had every reason to show up and every opportunity to cast their ballot for a Trump-endorsed candidate, simply did not care enough to bother. That kind of grassroots apathy is the single most dangerous thing that can happen to any political movement. You can survive hostile media coverage. You can survive bad poll numbers. You can survive court losses, but you absolutely cannot survive your own core voters not caring enough to get off the couch and vote when you need them. Third, Trump's desperate attempt to distance himself from this loss is transparently dishonest, and it makes his political problems worse. If he enthusiastically claims personal credit for every victory where his endorsed candidates win, which he always does loudly and immediately, then basic honesty requires him to accept responsibility when his endorsed candidates lose badly. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot publicly brand a candidate as your personal MAGA warrior and send out multiple messages urging millions to vote for her, and then turn around after she loses by 14 points and claim you were never really involved. Every time Trump runs from a loss like this, It chips away at the core mythology of his entire political brand. That brand is built entirely on the image of being a winner. The guy who always wins, the guy whose instincts are infallible. And each loss he runs from puts another visible crack in that facade. The bottom line is this. What happened in Texas is not just one bad special election night for Republicans, it is the clearest, loudest, most unmistakable warning signal, yet that something fundamental has shifted in the political landscape. Democratic voters are energized and motivated at levels we haven't seen in years. Republican voters, specifically the MAGA base voters that Trump depends on, are disengaged and unenthusiastic in ways that are now showing up at actual ballot boxes in real elections with real consequences. Trump's endorsement power is collapsing. His ability to drive base turnout through sheer force of personality is evaporating. And the 2026 midterm elections are now less than a year and a half away. If Republicans cannot figure out how to reverse these trends and figure it out fast, they are heading at full speed toward exactly the kind of massive electoral catastrophe that this Texas bloodbath just previewed for the entire country to witness. Trump can dismiss it as a local race all he wants. But everyone watching, including especially the Republican candidates who are going to have to run in genuinely competitive districts next November, knows exactly what this result really means. The MAGA magic is fading fast. The strongman act is rapidly losing its grip on the very voters it needs most. And ordinary Americans, including Republican voters who used to show up reliably every single time Trump asked them to, are starting to notice the cracks in ways that are now showing up exactly where it matters most. At the actual ballot box on actual election day. That's what happened in Texas. And that's why this result is going to keep Republicans up at night for a very long time.